claim that our eyes were just either slightly different from what they are, when we talk, we see things are normal.
Welcome to Strange Familiars. If you've seen something strange, a cryptid, a ghost, UFOs, Bigfoot, Bunny Man, Flannel Man, anything paranormal, and you'd like to share your story, you can email strangefamiliarspodcast@gmail.com. If you have a short story and you want to leave it as a voicemail, that's the quickest way to get us your story. Right now we're really backed up on interviews, but you can get us your story quickly by leaving a voicemail at 717-347-8554. If your story gets cut off, you can always just call back and continue. Again, that's 717-347-8554. So we got a great show tonight. I'll be talking with Lance, who's bringing some stories of his own and stories from his family in Kentucky. Going to talk about some unseen things in the woods, some boggarts, Bigfoot, and more. Tonight we're talking with Lance, who is going to tell us about a few different experiences. Do you want to start with the cryptid thing, or do you want to hit this Flannel Man real quick?
Well, we could start wherever you like. We could start with Flannel Man. That'd be fine.
Yeah. So I know you said, this maybe or maybe not was paranormal, and you kind of said to me before we started, now I don't know if it was paranormal or not. Maybe it's not worth talking about, but I like to catch all the Flannel Mans. So
right.
Whatever it was, let's hear the story.
Okay, this was I was a teenager, 18, 19. Me and a couple of friends were fishing at a local lake, which is really not much more than a big pond, less than probably 5 acres. But we were fishing one night, and we was out and about, and that was another strange occurrence that went on that night. When we decided to leave, it was really foggy. Started being really foggy. So, we're using out in a paddle boat because there's no gasoline motor's not allowed on it. So we're paddling in to get back to the ramp and boat ramp, and the fog just gets dense. Okay, we paddle. We wind up back where we started. 2 times more, start back to and you have to realize this. You can see one side to the other in daylight, end to end on this. And this happened a couple of different times. Finally, we said, well, we're just going to have to hug the bank all the way out, and made it back. Well, it took 2 hours to do what should have been 20 minutes at the most, this little trips. We load the boat up, heading back home. We're driving a little S10 pickup. There's 3 of us, packed in tight, pulling the boat behind. So we're coming up it's a 2-lane road, but it's really narrow, so you have to watch for oncoming traffic. But we're making pretty good trips, like 3 in the morning, pop up over this little rise in the road, and there's a guy. He's pretty much in the middle of what would be our side of the road. He's walking with his back to us. He's got green flannel, a green and black checkered flannel shirt, and what looked like maybe olive drab or dark sort of work pants. I don't know that shoes. And he turns his head to over would be his left shoulder and look, and you can just see the top of his face. Got black curly hair, and his skin is very, very white. I mean, it's just snow white. and what you could see of his eyes was just, I couldn't tell if there was any people there or what, but it was just like a squint, I guess you could say. And so and you have to understand he's right there after you come up above this little rise. And, well, we went on by, and there's just really I don't see how we missed the man. I was expecting at any time to feel, a thump, but
Right.
there wasn't. And, I wasn't driving. It was my truck, but I wasn't driving. My friend cousin was driving, and he was like, just, oh, God, freaking out. And we stopped, got out, looked back. There was nobody there, nobody in the road, nobody laying in the ditch, nobody walking up the side of the bank, nothing. I mean, there was nothing there.
Huh. Now, I'm very interested I'm interested in both parts, but the first part of your story where you said it took you too long to get off the pond.
Yeah.
Did you feel like you were lost in the fog, or did you just feel like you couldn't make progress?
No. It was a really dense fog. I mean, fog is nothing unusual, but I mean, it was pretty dense, and we only had a lantern, just a lantern light at the front of the boat, and we would be paddling out. The fog would swirl, get really, really thick, and paddle, and we would wind up at the same end of this little lake, a little pond that we started. And this happened, twice, at least twice. And it was like the point where this is absurd, this three virtually grown men on a small little lake like that, and can't get the way out, find a way out in a fog. I mean, but we did have to just stay right within view of the bank, within 10 feet of the bank to get back to the boat ramp. Mm-hmm. Finally, I mean.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I wonder if it's that I tell about my one experience of getting lost in about an acre of woods for about an hour or more. Uh-huh. And I wonder if it's a similar thing that kind of happened just on the water.
I couldn't tell you. I mean, it was sort of frustrating. At the time, I didn't think anything paranormal. This is just embarrassing.
Yeah. I felt the same way. I said, with another grown man, we're both kind of consider ourselves, maybe not, super woodsmen, but comfortable in the woods. And we were getting frustrated. And I'm glad he was there, because I said, like, if he wasn't with me, I might have sat down by myself, and who knows what would have happened. But I think there was kind of a little unspoken bravado going on between us where neither one of us was going to quit. But it was very, very frustrating. And I didn't, again, just like you said, I didn't think anything paranormal at the time. I just was like, what is going on? Why can't we get through this?
Right, yeah. I understand exactly, yes.
Yeah, well, then, seeing a guy right after this experience, seeing a guy in flannel, it's definitely worth noting. And then having him, maybe or maybe not disappear. I mean, it could have been, I guess it could have been a guy ran off or something. But...
well, it could have been, but I was really expecting. I mean, he was far enough, and he didn't look like he went to dodge or jump out of the way or anything. I mean, he didn't really react at all, other than to glance back over his shoulder. So I could just see I guess the top quarter of his face, one eye, bridge of his nose, and I've seen him well enough, I don't know. He had a really, really stark white skin. I mean, and at that time I'd never seen skin like that, that white. But
yeah, again, that's something I hear with these flannel men a lot. Very, very pale. Every now and then somebody will say he's ruddy and he had kind of darker skin, but more often you get people saying he's pale.
Right. Yeah.
What year did this happen?
This would have probably been in 90, 91. Yeah, about 91, 92. Yeah.
And as close as you're comfortable, you can be as general as you want. Where did that happen?
No, this be southeast Kentucky.
And is that where most of these encounters we're going to talk about have been?
Yeah. It's in southeast Kentucky. Out the next one I was going to talk about is it's in the hills of southeast Kentucky. It's well, I'll just start it.
Sure.
It was me and my old man. My dad was going to visit our family cemetery, which is located. It's a good 10 miles from the road and from any houses. But it's where he grew up. He had grown up in the area, and our family cemetery is there, and we got some family land there. So this was a weekly thing, and I was probably 15, 15, 16, I guess, probably about 15. But I was a secret smoker. I was sneaking and smoking. My mother and dad both, they just did not, very anti-smoke. But, that's what teenagers do. So I told the old man, I said, I'm going to go out around walk the ridge line and squirrel hunt, And I didn't have any intention of squirrel hunting. I was just going to go smoke. And so I said, okay, And so I'm walking along. This is the top of the ridge, is right straight in front of our family cemetery, where my dad's sitting. I probably not 200 yards up the ridge line, and I'm walking along and puffing a cigarette, and I start hearing like children's voices, and I'm like, well, strange. And then something, it sounded, the best I could describe it, like a pig snorting. That's what I took it as. I mean, it's not a distressed grunt or anything, just a normal, snort. Anybody's been around pigs knows, And for some reason, I deduced that some kids were chasing their pig up the hill. The pet got away. I don't know, escaped from farm. I don't know, but I got a real strong mental picture of that. And I got a real strong mental picture of, it was a boy and a girl. And the girl was maybe 2 years older than the boy. It just flashed in my head. That's who they was for some reason. So I'm hearing this for 2, 3, 4 minutes as I'm walking along. It's coming from my right, and now I'm walking a ridge line. So the right to my right is down one side of the mountain, and to the left is down the other side. It's coming from the right side. So I stand there listening for a minute, and it just keeps, and I could never understand what they were saying. It was just like, but it was like they was talking back and forth to one another, like kids would do, and I could never understand what they're saying. And of course, they're just the snorting of the pig. So I had to walk back a little bit, 10 or 12 feet to where I could see all the way down the wash on that side of the mountain, which where the sound was coming from. And I walk over there, look down through there. There's nothing moving. I mean, nothing moving. And dead still, and no sound at all. So, I'm pretty perplexed at this point. I mean, like, I know what I heard. I heard it, plainly, no mistaking what it was and where it was coming from. But there's nothing there, so I kind of just went, oh, well, and took back off to my original path, which was, down the ridge line. And I got about to where I first had turned back, 10 or 12 feet. And, I mean, all at once behind me, it was just like a thundering footfalls. I mean, I could feel it, the impact up my spine, and the snorting sound, but it was more of a growl then, a snort and growl, snort like growl. I don't know how to describe it other than that. Mm-hmm. And I flipped around, I swung around with a shotgun and unloaded the shotgun into nothing. I mean, there was nothing there, and took off running. I mean, I took off. If I would have turned around and seen it's, Satan riding a grizzly, it wouldn't surprise me. I was fully expecting to be mowed down by something, by the force of the footfalls.
So it sounded that close behind you.
Oh yeah. I mean, I could literally feel the vibration going up my feet, going up, into right up my back. I fully expected, and and then there's the split second of how could anything so big be so close? Because I was in that area looking around for the noise for a long time, or for several minutes, and I mean it was probably the scariest I've ever been, And I had been in the mountains from time I could about walk literally, and I never was frightened of the woods per se, but yeah, I was very frightened. And then I ran until I couldn't run no more, and there was a path, I was familiar with it. It kind of circled back to the cemetery where my dad was, a long way around, and when I come back, he said, "Well, did you get one?" And I was like, "No, I didn't." And because he could hear me shoot,
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I just sat there for a few minutes, and then I finally told him what happened. And he was like, "Well, but my old man had experiences in that area too, pretty much every one member of my family has had them and having them, it's own like thing."
Mm-hmm.
So he said, "Well, there's just some things you can't explain." But I kind of got the feeling that, when it happened, I've had a long time to think about it, and I was like, well, there's always possibility that you just had some kind of psychotic break or something, I've examined that, and I was like, well, I guess that's possible, but not probable, because there felt like there was a mind behind it.
Mm-hmm.
There felt like I felt like it was a real it was a joke. It was a joke. I went out and and I think that's a point that I was 15-year-old sneaking and smoking, but still, I kind of being punished for my arrogance, I guess, thinking that I was sneaking and smoking. I don't know. That thought had crossed my mind.
I was going to ask if you went out for more smokes in the woods.
Oh yeah, I did. I did, but I'm sorry to say, but that was such a one-off, or I thought that, you really can't, unless you're just not going to. If you're just going to say shut up in the house, you can't avoid. Obviously, you can't avoid whatever these things are,
Right. I don't know how much you want to get into your dad's experiences, but did he indicate specifically what had happened to him before?
Well, he had said when he was a young man, there was some kids, and I can't think their name at the moment, but he said that there was a couple of kids, and they fit the description. There was a boy and a girl, a younger boy and a little older sister, and he said you would run into them anywhere in the mountains. You could run into them anywhere, just out playing. They would play out through the mountains, and nothing happened to him or anything, but that would suggest a haunting by them. They both grew up and lived to old ages, but he kind of had the philosophy, maybe whatever it was took their persona, because they enjoyed the woods so much. I don't know how to explain it other than that.
Mm-hmm.
But I never, it never crossed my mind that it was some kind of what you would expect a ghost. That's why I didn't never have to know how to classify it. It's not a ghost story. It's not. I didn't see an apparition or anything, and there was nothing. There was no. I've heard people say, well, the zone of silence, and there was a little bit of that, but there was nothing that felt out of the ordinary all through the whole experience until I got rushed,
Right.
So I don't know, but yeah, that's what he was saying. I wish I could remember the children's name, but
so
he was saying that
he would run into these. The children were ostensibly ghosts or spirits, or they were alive when he was young.
No, they were alive. They were alive.
Okay.
He knew them. He knew the family, and he knew the children. And it was a common occurrence to run into them anywhere. You could run into them anywhere.
Gotcha.
Yeah, playing, and he was maybe suggesting that whatever that it was that had been messing with me, it took their persona or their characteristics, I guess, because they spent so much, they had so much fun in the hills too, and it was, I mean, I definitely got the feeling that I was the butt of a joke,
Right.
I mean, a very scary for me, but I could see the humor in it. Yeah, I really could.
Yeah. I mean, for something else, got a kick out of giving a good scare.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Huh. That's interesting. And I mean, and there's enough, like, what other people report, hearing laughter, kids laughter and kids crying. You get that a lot in these situations. And then the footsteps. I mean, I can't tell you. I mean, we very recently, my buddy Chad and I, he said we were out at night in the forest, and he said something's coming at us. He grabbed me and said, "Run." And I didn't see anything, I was talking to a third party, and I didn't even hear it. And he grabbed me. He's like, "No, it's something big." And then it just stopped. There was nothing there. So don't know if it's the same thing or it's just something similar. But he said he heard it coming through like a truck, and just never saw anything.
Yeah, right. Well, I've spoke to a few people about it, and I've had people suggest that it was, Bigfoot related, and I'm like, no, it's not Bigfoot related unless he's invisible and bulletproof, because I didn't see a thing, and I was firing right where the sound was coming from. I mean, this was behind me.
You did fire the shotgun then?
Oh, I did. Yes, I did. Yes, I did.
Okay.
Like I was saying, I fully expected to and see what I didn't know. A heavy animal bearing down on me. So I mean, it was a self-defense move. It was my intention there. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting.
And I mean, this is the middle of the day. This is 1 o'clock in the day, and I mean, there was no shadow or difficulty seeing anything. It was clear, crispy clear day.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, it's all related, but I could be wrong.
Well, it is to me. I've come to that conclusion. There's just too many. I mean, there's too much overlap in about any kind of subject in the paranormal. There's just too much overlap.
Yeah, I tend to agree. It's just, I mean, there's just too many things when people talk about hearing baby crying sounds and then seeing Bigfoot, or then seeing an alien, or then seeing a ghost. It's like, come on, there's like too much is alike between these different things.
Right. Yeah. Well, this area that I'm talking about here, I mean, it's like I was saying, my family's been in there for years, since the late 1700s, and there's been some part of my family living there until recently, or fairly recently, and there's just been a lot of stuff happening there.
Did I hear you right when you said you had to? This is 10 miles from the nearest road. You're going to, like, where this family cemetery was?
Well, yeah, any main road.
Okay.
There's dirt roads to it.
Mm-hmm.
But any main road, the main road. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. Still, that's a good ways out.
Yeah. It's pretty good, pretty isolated. But my grandfather, to give you another idea of what some of the other things, my grandfather's house, well, he's actually my great grandfather, had a house, and this wouldn't be 600 yards from where this happened, what happened to me there. And he had a room in his house and it was just the one room. You couldn't sleep in it because every time you would go to sleep, anybody would go to sleep or start to go to sleep, something would just cover off of them. And those people around here called them boggarts. It's pretty common, you know. You heard other people speak about it, but they went on for years. And my grandfather, which would be his son-in-law, stayed the night there once, waiting for it. And I mean, you have to understand, my great grandfather had no electricity. It was coal oil lamps at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But my grandfather stayed there and waited for it. And he said that, another thing it would do is rub a cold hand down your face, you know, and pull the covers off. It had those two tricks. But he was laying there, and he said he could feel the cover ruffle right next to his chin, you know, like somebody taking a handful of cover. And when he did that, he laid into it and wrestled it. And he always said it was like wrestling a block of ice. It was so cold. Wow. And he kept trying to crack a match. And every time he would crack a match, whatever this was would blow it out. Yeah, and yes, and the old man was one of these. He was the old mountain man that, you know, he will tell you a lie. You know, what's the point of lying? But when he said he finally got the one lit, a match cracked and lit, and got the lamp lit. And this is, you got to understand, he's holding on with one hand and lighting the lamp with the other. He was holding nothing, and it was just gone.
Oh,
but
wow.
after that, no, there was no more activity in that room.
Huh. Wow. That's
yeah.
Okay, first, super brave. I'm going to sit in here and wrestle this thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, you have to understand that his generation, they was raised in the area, so I mean, you know, you did what you had to do, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but
he didn't.
So the name derivation of Bogart, that's I've read that in a lot of Celtic fairy books and stuff. So that probably came over, with your people. The name for it, I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
That's really neat. The other thing I want to point out, so this part of Kentucky in the 1700s, actually any part of Kentucky in the 1700s, this is the frontier at this point.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There's nothing out there. Allison's father does genealogy, and my paternal family went down to West Virginia, and I think it was all Virginia territory at that point, even though what became Kentucky and all that stuff. And that's when he says it's hardest to track my family because they're just out there on the frontier essentially, and there's just not a lot of records or anything else going on because they're it's just complete wilderness at that point. So it's worth noting that if your family was out there that long ago, that was something else back then. It was completely wild at that point.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. It was wild when they set up there. Yeah. Absolutely.
Bogart, is that just common usage amongst people, or was that just in your family?
No, it was pretty common for the older. Most older folks used that. They would use that, and I guess there's another that I would classify pretty common occurrence when people rode horses. Not so much, of course, not so much nowadays, but they would also call this a bogart, and it would, like, you would be riding a horse or a team of horses that, several people in the group. You could feel something jump behind you, and it would ride a certain distance, always the same distance, at a certain point, jump off. Mm. They call that bogart too. So I guess they use it as a generic term for anything that was like nonsensical. I mean, what would be the sense of that? That would be all that you would feel too. The horse would give, when it would jump on, and then you could feel it give a little bit when it jumped off, and then if you come back through, it would pick the same horse that rode in the the first trip and ride back at the same 2 points. Now that was common. That was a common known happening in this area, and that happens in several different hollows. That's what you would say here. And there would be several different hollows would have the exact same kind of occurrence, and it would always be some kind of landmark, a big rock next to the road, or a creek, or whatever, it crosses a path or whatever. It would always be some kind of spot we marked, a landmark of some kind.
Right. Which is interesting as well, because there's a lot of fairy lore will have them living inside of big rocks, and of course, right. We've noted a million times how often things happen near creeks and stuff. So, very, very interesting. Yeah, that's really interesting. I love that folklore like that. That's really, really cool.
Something. I've pondered on this for years. I've had an interest since I was a young kid. Hearing all these family stories, and then, when I could read whatever I could, all kinds of different things, and it never really made sense to me that, ghosts, everything gets lumped in with a ghost. Anything that's, and I was like, well, these kind of occurrences, they're just nonsensical.
Right.
What would be the point of a haunting? And I'm really leaning towards some kind of fairy lore for explaining a lot of things.
Yeah, I think so. When you think of it as, if we're defining ghosts as the spirits of dead people, what purpose would that serve? To me, it's almost like they're kind of replaying parts of their life. If that's what they are. If they have some kind of active agency where they're doing things that they didn't do. If someone repeatedly sees the same old woman, walk from the kitchen to the whatever, the dining room or whatever, and disappear, you think, well, maybe that's just they're sort of replaying something, that happened before. But like you say, when these kind of things that just don't make sense, they're just weird things that it just doesn't seem like the spirit of a dead human. It seems like something else.
Right. Yes. I know you were interested in Bigfoot stories, and I do have one.
Oh yeah.
From this happened to my dad, and this would be in the same general area. It's probably maybe a mile and a half as crow flies from all these other weird instances. But he was probably 18 at the time. I've heard this story all my life, so. He was coming home one night, and was walking, and he said it was really, really cold and dark, and really couldn't see much of anything. Just stayed with the gravels, in the road. Said the wind was blowing, and he didn't have a hat, so he had his collar of his coat lifted up high and buttoned up, and had his hands in his pockets. Kind of leaned forward, walking into the wind, So all at once, he just walks into what he said was a wall of hair, and she threw out his hands, in a reflective motion, and grabbed 2 handfuls of hair.
Oh wow!
On either side. Yeah, and he said it was like, it was hair. It was 3 or 4 inches. He got handfuls of it, and he said whatever it was took off up the mountain, up the hill from where the road, out of the road, and he took off down this creek, which was frozen. And he said he was busting his butt, every step or two, but he got out of there. And next day, he said he went back the next day with a rifle, his rifle, and could see where it tore up the bank, getting up to the top of the bank. But after it leveled out, the ground was too hard to leave any sign. But now he never did say, well, I grabbed hold of Bigfoot. He never did say that. He always said, I walked into a wall of hair.
Right.
And I kept, over the years, I was like, well, it was a bear. It was, and I'm like, no, at the time there was no bear in this area. But if he would have walked into a bear, in the middle of the winter, in the middle of the night, well, he would have been mauled.
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine. And in the second place too, my old man was, good sized man. He's 6'2", and you got a wingspan of that amount, a 6 foot wingspan, and you're grabbing her. I mean, there sure ain't no Kodiaks in Kentucky,
Right.
So,
that would be a massive black bear.
Yes, it would have to be. But now he would never say. Well, but I mean, he would kind of, what else?
Right.
But my old man had some weird experiences. But now he never did. He never did like it. I mean, he was a literature wise, he was more, like Western and war and history, and he never liked the paranormal stuff, but a lot of stuff did happen to him.
Honestly, I'd say if that was a Bigfoot, he got away easy, because the stories I have, and I've collected 2 of them now, of people literally running into him at night. They don't end well. Both of them got injured.
Well, yeah, he did. I mean,
so he got lucky, I think, if that's what it was, because I always tell people, if you get a chance, like if you're within touching range, I wouldn't reach out and touch him, because the stories I've heard do not end well when people touch him.
Right. Well, I mean, I don't know. He always had the impression that he surprised whatever it was. It was as surprised as he was, because I mean he was walking into the wind. So he was downwind of anything ahead of him anyway. So,
right.
He said, well, whatever it was, he got the impression the way it took off away in the opposite direction he did.
Right.
It startled it. Yeah.
both of them running in opposite directions.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of strange things that's happened in that area, and my old man was more a ape and wood type guy as far as when he did talk about Bigfoot. He was more, he never did really consider it paranormal.
Yeah. Well, I think, and I always say I don't blame, like, if you're a hunter or something and you just run into one in the woods or just see one walking by or something, and if you're in a tree stand, I never blame those people at all for thinking they're just natural. What would you think,
Right, yeah.
I mean, that seems perfectly logical to me. It's only when the people, like I said, the people who have repeat experiences, that's when they start talking about the really weird stuff. And
right.
So that's what kind of keys me in to like, okay, there's something else going on here. But yeah, I don't blame people. If that's all that happened, I would absolutely think, if that's all I knew, I was in a tree stand or something and one walked by, or I, saw one in the woods and I was a hunter, absolutely. I don't blame people for a second for just thinking they're just some kind of unknown animal.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, you don't have any indication otherwise in a lot of circumstances. But,
yeah, exactly. Same thing when people see them crossing the road or something. From all reports, they look, in most times, 90% of the time, they look solid and real and just look like a regular creature. So if you just see one cross the road in front of your car or something, or see one alongside the road, yeah, I don't blame people for thinking they're natural at all. It's only when you dig in and start really sort of collecting all the weird stuff, and there's enough of it for me. There's enough of it where it really kind of changed my mind on the topic.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And you start getting some of the Bigfoot. I mean, they get really worked up.
Oh, yeah.
Well, they're natural animals, but they mind speak. If they mind speak you, they're not natural. I mean, It's just like you got to follow a logical train here.
Yeah. Well, exactly, and I'll even go so far sometimes to say, okay, if they're natural, they have abilities that we don't understand. That's the only thing. You know what I mean? So, okay, let's say they're natural, they're some kind of animal, but either they're the kings of evolution and they've evolved things that no other animal has, or they just have access to some talents or abilities or something that we just don't even have a clue how they work. So That's the only way I can make it work in my head as a natural animal. And then at that point, like you said, at what point does that turn from a natural animal to something, something else? Yeah.
All right. Well, I don't know. I've been thinking about these cryptids, and then you get some of the more exotic cryptids like Dog Man, and for different. I can see where Bigfoot makes sense historically speaking, but you get into these Dogman type and other type cryptids, and I start to draw the line there. I was like, no, they're not. I don't see any possible way that these could be natural cryptids. They're just not scientifically plausible.
Yeah. That's a dog is a pretty efficient thing. Like, it doesn't to evolve into that form. I can't make it work. Again,
no.
Yeah, I cannot see that for a second. And the fact that we have this folklore from all over the world that talks about these things right alongside us throughout history, and none of this folklore says they were natural things, werewolves or these different shape changing things that the First Nations people talk about. None of them say they were just natural animals. They're always something supernatural in some way or another. So to me, it's like we don't need to reinvent the wheel to talk about these things. The history's there. It's just it's folklore at this point, which for me, that's just different names we had in the old days for calling the stuff, and the reports, maybe they got exaggerated or changed around a bit over time, and that's whispering down the lane. That's the folk process that happens,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, sometimes I wonder though if some of these manifestations, which I do believe people are seeing dogmen, or but what they really are. I mean, I think there's some kind of manifestation of something else. Mm-hmm. And what purpose, purpose that could be, it's up for debate. Personally, I believe there's some kind of feeder. They manifest to exploit energy somehow, from the environment. You've got a lot. The thing I said about and like dogman groups, you've got an apex predator or something that's nothing. There's nothing like it. And where's the accounts of it really predating? I mean. Mm-hmm. You see it eating roadkill and harassing people. I mean, doing harassing actions towards people. What is it? Stimulating fear. Feed off fear. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I mean, and there could be there could be a lot of reasons why they manifest. But I feel a lot of times that a lot of these cryptids are some kind of drones to interact in the physical plane to do some kind of energy exploitation. I mean, I don't like that.
Well, especially the Dogman reports are. I mean, people report just being terrified by these things, and I can't. I've listened to a bunch of them. I haven't listened to every single one, but I've listened to a lot of different accounts, and they're not attacking people; they're scaring them.
Right.
They'll get right up in their face and scare the heck out of them, but they're not clawing them to pieces. That's not what people are reporting. They're saying that it came up to my car window, or it did this or did that. You're right. It seems like they're trying to get some kind of fear reaction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You can't designate something an apex predator and then hit not do his nature. Hit not.
Right.
To kill.
Right.
And,
yeah, and something that big needs all the calories it can get.
Exactly. Yeah. I'll have that same argument when it comes to a lot of Bigfoot. And I'm saying, well, what would be the caloric requirements for an average 600-pound primate? I mean,
with the big brain.
What kind? Yes, with the big brain. What? I mean, does the woods? I mean, I could see that in something in Canada and in some untapped areas, but we get them all over. Mm-hmm. I mean, what kind of impact would that have on wildlife? And you have to assume it would be an omnivore. What what kind of an impact would that have on wildlife?
Right.
You're going to start noticing. Yeah. Yeah, I don't see it. I just don't see how it's workable.
Yeah, and especially, people talk about finding these Bigfoot kills, and they're saying, well, only the liver was taken, or only,
Mm-hmm.
It's like if it would need every single part,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what First Nations people, they use every part of every animal
Mm-hmm.
because it made sense to. You want the calories, you want to be able to use everything you can, and
Yeah.
it's not only that, but they're not processing the food, or if they are, they're really good at hiding their fires because it's not like we're seeing them filled with fires at night. So they're eating raw this means they're not processing the food like we are. They're not getting the calories. That's the most efficient way to get calories from meat is to cook it.
Right. But you mentioned taking the liver. Liver is a very blood and saturated organ. I do believe that there's a connection with blood in a lot of these cryptids. I mean, we've got centuries of folklore that says that blood, there's something magical or special or energetic about blood. I can see that.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, if it was a natural animal, there shouldn't be a morsel left.
Right. I especially something that big with a big brain. It's just I've done the research on it just for the book I'm working on, and they said if a mountain gorilla, which is not anywhere near, I mean the tallest mountain gorilla was I think 6.5 feet tall ever. So these aren't even close to the size of reported Bigfoot, but if a mountain gorilla had a brain our size, it would have to eat, and it eats constantly. When it's awake, it's eating. Like they're foraging constantly. Right. So they would need another hour and a half in their day to get enough food to power the brain, which basically they need a longer day, essentially. There's not enough time in the day for them to get enough calories they would need if they had a brain the size of ours. So, if you just extrapolate that to, something the size of a Bigfoot, it's really hard equation to make. That's one of the most difficult things for me when people talk about it as a natural animal. It's like, what are they eating? Where are they going? Where are they coming from? And I, because I'm in York County, Pennsylvania, where I live, there's no wilderness left. We have some, woods and wooded areas and stuff, but no true wilderness where, untouched by man. So, and people see them here all the time. I get tons of reports. Come on, like where are they living? Where are they going? What do they eat? It's just so much of it just doesn't make sense. But the calories, especially when I'm out in the woods and I'm looking, and it's like, wow, in the middle of winter they have to be purely carnivores, and there's we'd be finding bodies all over the place of animals.
Yeah, I agree. I do want to commend you on your the powwow episode.
Oh yeah, I was going to ask you about that anyway. Yeah, let's.
Yeah, that is big, or I should say, used to be big in the area. It's kind of dying out now, which is a shame. But I personally never could get the origin. It's like. It was like a man could tell a woman could tell a man, but I never did get an origin of a lot of those, I guess, charms and stuff. But until your episode, I posted that to my Facebook page, so the family and stuff could see it. But yeah, that was really interesting. That used to be, it used to be very common, in the area, but a lot of the older culture and folklore is sadly dying out with the internet age.
That's everywhere, sadly. So would there be like a local man or somebody you go to for healing? Was that the idea, or a woman?
Yeah. I had an aunt, well, would be a great aunt that could do a lot of things. She could draw fire, and she could do a lot of things. I remember one time my other aunt, which would have been her daughter-in-law had frostbit her heels really bad, and we're talking 1900s here, you know. And she come over to her house, and she said, "Well, what's wrong?" And my aunt Ellen said, "Well, I frostbit my heels," and she tells her husband, says, "Go out and kill me a rabbit and bring it straight to me when you kill it." So he goes out, shoots a rabbit, brings it in. She takes her hands, pulls the hide off the rabbit, and places it on my aunt's heels. And she tells her, says, "Now leave this on till I tell you to take them off. Put you on some thick socks, leave them out, you know, till I tell you to take them off." So, you know, my aunt goes for a week, you know, with her socks, you know, and she about forgot it, you know. And she goes back and says, "Well, when can I take these rabbit skins off? You know, it's the smell." And she said, "Oh, I forgot about that." Takes and pulls them off, and there's no sign of frostbite. The flesh of her heels was pink and new and perfect. I mean, you know, I don't know if that's per se in the powwow, but and there was another time my uncle's horse had got bit, or his mule got snake bit. You know, he was really worried because that was your livelihood.
Right. Yeah.
And that day, yeah, and he took it to her, and she leads it out into the stream and takes water out of the stream and just dips it up on it. And the rest of the people, the rest of my family was there, didn't know what they said she was saying something, muttering something, and rubbing that mule's leg. So she came a few minutes, leading it out, and there was no sign, no swelling, no sign of even a bite had taken place. Just, yeah, there's some, I mean, I've always believed it, you know, well, I've seen it work, you know.
Right.
The buying of warts and whatnot, which, you know, people say, "Oh, you're superstitious." Well, okay, whatever, it works. I don't need any more confirmation.
Well, warts and stuff like poison ivy, it seems to be demonstrably effective. In other words, these things are also the easiest to cure with hypnosis, for instance. Hypnosis is a really, really good rate for curing warts. So it makes sense that the same kind of thing would work. You know, whatever mechanism is working with hypnosis works with that. Yeah, it's really, really interesting. So did they call it by a name? Like I heard in Appalachia sometimes it's called granny magic. Did they call it that, or did they just...
I've heard it called that, but more like white witchcraft. They would call it white witchcraft or white witchery, or you know. And then you got like dowsers. They would be water witch. Right. You know, you call them water witches.
Yeah, no, that's what we called them here as well, or at least in Maryland, where I grew up. Right.
Yeah, that's a really good. I was really thrilled when I heard your podcast in there. That's been, you know, a long time I've been wondering about the origins of that stuff. And
yeah, well, I mean, it seems like there was a strain of, you know, so that's the powwow was the German stuff, and I think there was a strain that came over, you know, with the Irish and Scottish and so forth as well. And I think, you know, that survives in pockets of Appalachia, but I don't know if they have a book. You know what I mean? Like we had that long friend that kind of documented it. I don't know if there's one book, or, you know, do you know if she had anything like that, a book or
No, as far as I could gather, it was all oral, you know, and you had to pass from a man to a woman and vice versa, you know, pass it like that.
Right.
That's as deep as I could get into it. That's as deep as anybody really knows. But there is a lot of German influence in this area. You know, it's mostly Scotch Irish, but there's a heavy German. Or back in the day, there was a heavy German influx too into this part of Appalachia. So it's all got blended in, and I'm sure there's a lot of blended in with Cherokee folklore and medicine and whatnot.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you lived, let's say back then, you lived 10 or 20 miles from town, that's a haul. It's not like you can
yeah.
hop in a car and go. This is something that if the doctor's 10 miles away, 20 miles away, you need these people that can heal. They were needed in the community. I honestly think that's they really played an important part in those old rural communities. I really believe it, and probably saved a lot of lives, honestly, because you need somebody. You get burned up real bad. What are you gonna do? You need somebody who's helping right away, and if they've got remedies, whatever works at that point. But
yeah, absolutely. I've got a couple more personal experiences, but they're even more so. One of them is even more so weird than the whatever that I interacted with in the woods that day. I mean, I was younger when this happened, but I've got a pretty good memory. I mean, I can remember stuff, and I know memory how it can be unreliable and all that. And I'm scientific based. I wish the world was as simple as materialism and stuff like that. But I've had experiences that tells me otherwise.
Right.
But I was about 5 or 6, and I had actually started really wanting to talk about this after I had kids. I didn't have children until my first one was when I was 38, and after I had children, and I started thinking, well, if these things happen to me, I want them to know about it. I want them to be prepared, because more than likely, they're going to run into this sometime in their life.
Right.
But what had gotten me, or brought this story up strongly, there was the story in one of Linda Godfrey's books, I think it's Monsters Among Us. There was a story, and it was really surrealistic in a way, but there was a child, or I think it was a girl, and a man was holding up a manhole cover. I think this was in California, and he was beckoning for her to come, and then to him, and then he started transforming into a dogman type figure. I guess that's why it was in the book. Mm-hmm. Well, the beckoning part really got to me, and I actually had emailed her about it and corresponded with her a little bit about the story. But so I was about 5 or 6, and I had got my dad. My dad was he was a typical, American dad, wanted his son to be a major league ball player, baseball player. Right. Well, he had gotten me for my birthday a full-size wooden major league bat. And obviously it was a bit big for my age, but him and my sister and me would all, play in our front yard. He would pitch the ball back and forth and whatnot. And I had my bat out there one day, and I can't remember what it was that I got mad about, but it was unreasonable. I even at the time, I know I was being a brat, about it. So I storm off, and I'm going to take my bat and leave, So I walk around the corner of our house with my bat, and I'm out in the backyard, side yard, just being a brat, just stewing. And I swear you're going to think this. This is crazy, but there was a voice coming out from under the crawl space. And our crawl space stayed up. It was square, about big enough for a grown man to just get under access to the crawl space. And there was a voice come from there, and it said my first name. It said, "Come under here." And I'm like, I just stand there for, swinging my bat around us. And he kept saying that. He kept saying my name. Kept saying, "Come under here." And I thought, at first I was like, it was my sister, and because it did vaguely sound like her, and I was like, you better stop, because I was a ruffian when I was younger, So my sister she's 7 years older than me, so we kind of had a relationship, a rough relationship, loving but rough.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought she was messing with me, and I said, you better stop, and it said her name, and it said, I'm not her. It said, come under here. And I mean, he'd done that 2 or 3 times, and I'm like, no. I kept insisting it was her, and I was like, and it kept insisting that it wasn't. I mean, it was at night. It said, I'm not her. It said, but it would say, come under here. And I was getting closer to the crawl space while I was talking to him. I mean, this went on for a good 5 minutes. And I kept thinking, because I kept thinking it was her messing with me, my sister messing with me. And I kept getting closer to the crawl space. And I said, no, I'm not coming under there. I said, you come out here. And I was rearing back with the baseball bat, and I was meaning to clobber, whoever, my sister, whoever, for doing that to me. And it's like, no, I'm not her. Come under here. I said, well, I'm not coming under. If you're not coming out, then I guess it's, yeah. Then I walk around to the front of the house, and my sister's out there, still out in the yard playing ball with my dad. And I was like, then it shook me. I mean, it really shook me.
Yeah.
And I went and sat down on the front porch, and don't remember saying much for the rest of the day. But the voice was really, really weird. And I tell you, it kind of sounded like my sister, and then it kind of sounded like my mother. And I don't know if you're a fan of the Lord of the Rings movies,
mm-hmm.
but there's a part where they think Gandalf, is dead. The rest of them, the heroes, and they're in that forest, and they think Gandalf's dead, and he appears, but the voice kind of phases between him and his voice and the other wizard's voice.
Yeah,
that's what it was like. That's what it was like. It was kind of like phasing, like, because they sound, well, of course they sounded similar anyway. They sound similar, but distinct enough to know the difference. So it would like phase between those two. And I was like, oh no.
Wow.
And then my mother was the only one else at home that day, and I mean, I was probably in my 20s before I finally asked her, and she's like, no, no, I never, because I thought she might have been trying to teach me a lesson, for being a brat. And she said, no, it wasn't. I didn't do that. It wasn't me. And I know my mother is the type that she never let us believe in Santa Claus, because that would be a lie.
Mm-hmm.
There's no Santa Claus. So she said it wasn't her. So, but that's my voice from the crawl space. And then I had actually heard you on the episode with of the Where Did the Road Go podcast, and I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he had mentioned something about a little girl had seen a cartoon character under a trailer that was trying to get her to come under there.
Yep.
So yeah. I mean, this is I didn't see anything. There was just a voice. And,
right. Yeah, that's so bizarre. That is so bizarre.
Yeah.
Man, probably a good thing you didn't go under there.
Right. Well, I was thinking, I mean, if that happened to me, I mean, what's happened to other people that do, especially children? What happened? I mean, it's like it's a movie, like It, sort of. I mean,
mm-hmm.
Of course, but I guess they would just disappear. Children would just disappear. But I mean, that has, it bothers me to think about it right now.
Yeah.
And I don't like that. I don't like that kind of thing. I like the scientific explanations and logic and reason, but I know that that's not a false memory or anything. I know that happened because it was burned into my mind.
Wow. So was there a sort of an open area where you could have easily gone under?
Oh yeah. I could just more or less not even have to crawl at that size to get out of there. I could just, goose stepped on there a little bit, goose walked, but I don't know. It was coming from. I mean, it's coming from far enough back, of course, that I couldn't see, anything.
Right.
But
yeah, that's so creepy. Anything at the time that something's either calling out the kids or, you hear stories of things, kind of waving kids over, like come here motion. Got a couple of Sasquatch reports with that. Anytime that happens, it's like, wow, that's so creepy. Especially given all these, missing 411 cases and stuff. And I'm not saying that explains one of them. I'm just saying, who knows? Who knows what happens if you would have gone under there?
Right. Well, I mean, like I was saying, I've got along in my life now. I've got a profession. I mean, I'm a professional person, and I always kind of kept these things quiet for. I didn't want stigmatized with these. I'm not like one of these people this happens to on a regular basis. This is over a lifetime. These things have happened.
Right.
It's been very prominent. There's no explaining it without invoking some kind of paranormal. Something from the paranormal.
Right.
But I wanted my children to be aware that you can. There's things that you can't explain.
Yeah. There's
been many decades now that I've not really talked about these things, but it comes to a point where you got to get it out. You got to leave it for for the ones that come after.
Yes. Yeah. I truly believe that. I think that, and I've said it before. I like that this podcast. It kind of serves a dual purpose in that form for me. It's documenting these stories in a sort of folkloric way. I can't write every story down in a book. I would if I could, because I get so many great stories on here. But
right.
A good way I can document a lot of stories is to do this weekly and talk to people, all the time. And the other thing is that the more people hear somebody, somebody's going to hear you and say, well, if he told his story, I'll tell my story,
Right. Well, that's one reason that I went ahead and I've started writing some of these stories down, and I wanted it to, be out there. And I wanted to just ask your opinion about something. I got active on Twitter. Started a blog. Tried to get active on Twitter and just kind of connect with people, and there seems to be just a almost insurmountable divide between what I would call mainstream paranormal subjects and more in depth of the root of it. Where is this coming from? Type. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
And I don't want to say that it's active. I don't. It took me. I've been active on Twitter for at least 2 years now, and I discovered your podcast a few months ago, or maybe a couple of months ago when I first contacted you. Mm-hmm. And I mean, this is daily looking into or seeing what people are talking about and what's been written and whatnot. And you can't get past the fluff, a certain retelling of old legends. Well, that's great and stuff, but I could about recite old ghost stories from, and UFO, famous UFO and Bigfoot cases. I could about recite that. I want something deeper, and it's almost like there's an active suppression effort. I don't know. It sounds conspiratorial, but I'm serious.
Yeah, it's really, and I've said in private we have a sort of private chat with all the sort of behind the scenes people from Where Did the Road Go and Strange Familiars and so forth. And I've said several times on there that, I think, and I don't want this to sound egotistic, but I just think we're coming at it in a different way. Let's put it that way. I think
absolutely
we're coming at the problem in a different way. And I'm very, very happy about that, because you're right. It's a fight. When I talk to ghost hunters, for instance, very nice people. This ghost hunting group invited me to be a part of their group. They're super nice people. I like them. Some of them have really, really interesting techniques they're using and stuff. But if you suggest for a second, like, hey, maybe this isn't like the spirit of a dead person, maybe there's something else going on here, you will get a blank stare. And that's all you will get.
Right.
It does not go beyond that for them. And heaven forbid if you say, hey, I'm doing the same thing out in the woods, you think they're connected. It's like, what? There's a complete, disconnect there. It's very compartmentalized. The UFO people, for the most part, want to talk about UFOs. They do not want to talk about ghosts or Bigfoot. And the same thing, with the Bigfoot people in general. They don't want to talk about UFOs. They don't want to talk about ghosts. That stuff's crazy. They want to talk about Bigfoot, and same with the ghost people, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know why the resistance. I really don't. I can understand it a little bit from the cryptozoological crowd, because they are very, very invested in proving it's an animal. And
right.
If somebody like me comes along and I'm a thorn in their side constantly. But I understand it. I understand that, because some of these guys have worked their entire life to prove this is an animal, and here I come along just again and again saying, I don't think so, and here's why. So I can understand that pushback, but it's like ghost people, I really don't understand. Like, why aren't you guys ready to like expand? Let's look at how it relates. If you're trying to collect, I talked to a guy, he's trying to collect ghost hair in a comb, and I said, I'm telling him, like, you're doing the same thing I'm doing. He's talking about putting footprints in powder, collecting hair in a comb, and fingerprints on a mirror from ghosts. I said, I'm doing the same thing in the woods, and it just isn't. I don't know. I don't know why. I'm hoping we can bust down some of these walls.
Yeah. I see. It's kind of this is the pattern that brought me to your show. I had heard Josh Cutchin on another podcast on let's see what it's got, Ram of the Paranormal, I think it is now. But I had been corresponding with those guys for a while, and I had heard him on that show, and looked him up and came through that to your show, and I was like, this is just too complicated. I mean, why? And you've been doing the show for years, and why has this not come up on my radar before? It's bewildering, and I'm still talking about, I work for a living, but this is for years, at least a couple of years now, this has been my main focus besides my family, outside of my job, and
right.
It's taken this long. It's just so strange.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a minority of people, but I think it's growing. I think the people that are willing to just, let's talk about this in a holistic way, the entire, phenomenon, it's growing. And, there have been people who did this way before me. I mean, I think John Keel was doing it, in the 70s, and some of his fellow researchers back then, so this is nothing, we invented or anything. But I think it just takes a long time for people to come around to it. Because, I used to work at a guitar shop, and the owner said, the hardest thing to do is to sell a guitar to somebody whose cousin played guitar, and they told them blank brand, brand X was the best guitar, because they look up to their cousin, and their cousin was the first person they knew that played guitar, and that person told them brand X is the brand you have to get. And to try to tell them anything but brand X is like climbing a mountain. So I think there's some of that goes on in this too. People are, their friend is, introduces them to, this ghost hunting group or something, and they get involved, and that's the way, that they were introduced. So that's the way it is, Convincing people or shaking them out of that is difficult sometimes. But like I said, I think people are coming around to it. I do think more and more people are open to it.
Well, I'm glad to finally find some like-minded individuals out there. I mean, I was getting really discouraged because I mean, you can just go so far with retelling these old, historic stories, and I don't want to sound, I don't know, but ghosts are it's just become boring, just plain old ghost stories. I mean, and it's been saturated with these ridiculous, reality
Right.
TV ghosts, and it just got to the point of absurdity, and it's hard to get a discussion with. Like you said, it's hard to get a discussion that goes. Well, okay, this stuff has been happening since recorded history, and we're stuck in these boxes. Let's think outside the box a while.
Yeah, all my work might lead to nothing. I hope not. I hope I'm able to do something. But
no, well, I'll tell you, I was speaking for myself. I'm glad you're doing what you are doing, because, like I said, it was getting very, very discouraging. And the stories I've gotten, and the stories that has happened to my family. I want to put out there, and I was like, well, I don't know how to. I'm kind of like so saturated with all this. It's the opposite of writer's block. Is what do you put in, and how do you classify it, and how do you try to make people see that maybe there's a pattern here, or maybe there's a root cause or a root source for a lot of these things.
Right. It's no coincidence that you're telling all these stories that happen around this one property.
Yeah.
And maybe it's that it's all happening around this one family, your family, or maybe it's both. Maybe it's the way your family and the land react together in some way.
Yeah. I do believe it's, like you said, I do believe it's a lot focused on the area I was talking about, where the Bogart had took up residence. I mean, I'm looking into a few things, and it sits in a bowl, more or less, of cliffs. There's cliffs all the way around this, rock outcroppings, and very water. There's springs, literally, you can dig down 2 feet and hit groundwater. And from what I understand, there's rock, a lot of quartz outcroppings and water, especially running. It's really highly energetic. I can see that because it's right there. It's like a lens, I guess. It's just my thought on that.
That's one of the things I keep running into. Running water and quartz. Quartz is used in they say in devices. That stores memories. It's used in computers and so forth. Is running water over quartz? Does that do something? Does that?
Right.
I don't know, but it's certainly something that happens again and again in all these different locations. It's something I find.
Well, I know you like the ghost light, so I've got one quick ghost light story for you. And this happened to my sister, and this is the exact same property. We've got my sister actually had built a small cabin there at my grandpa's old place. So we got a cabin there, and she spends a lot of time. Don't live there, but spends a lot of time there. And this happened just I think it was last year. Her and her fiance was driving up to the cabin. There's a long driveway from the road, which is a gravel road, but there's a long driveway up to the cabin. So they're driving up to there, and they see all at once there's like what they thought at first was an ATV right behind them. I mean, right behind her. They're in a pickup truck. So, and it's right on their tailgate coming all the way up the driveway. And this is probably, I don't know, a few hundred yards or so driveway. And they didn't think anything of it because there's some ATV traffic on that dirt road all the time, and they know people that ride ATVs up there. So didn't think really nothing out of it, and stop the vehicle in front of the cabin, get out, and there's nothing behind them, nothing at all behind them. And I mean, she was like, well, I don't know, but she's had so many experiences there. It's like no big deal, I mean, she's had the trail cam on the feeding site there, and so I mean, there's been weird pictures, unexplainable pictures on it, and then she's seen other things there, and I mean. But she said she thought it was a headlight of an ATV.
Oh wow!
A big, but it was right behind them. there's no way. I mean, there's absolutely no way on this earth that it could have been an ATV right behind them, and then as soon as they stop the vehicle and get out, it's gone. You know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's no way. There's no way.
Yep, I was going to ask you. I would have been surprised if there wasn't at least some kind of weird light story associated with.
Yeah.
Yeah. The pictures on the game cam, is it light phenomenon that she's catching?
Oh, well, there's a series on there, and there's eye shine. I've got eye shine on the side of a tree, and at first, I was flipping through them because I take all the chips off of the camera and just look through them, and there's eye shine on the side of a tree. And I didn't think really much of it at first because you get all kinds of wildlife. You get coons, you get even bears, deers, what have you, about anything you can name. But then I got to realizing how far the tree was in the frame, and how wide set the eyes were. And I mean, there's 3 consecutive shots. There's shot with eye shine, next shot there's no eye shine, next shot there's eye shine, but it's just a little bit different. And what had triggered the camera, there was a deer in the foreground between the eye shine and the camera. There's a stump there that we use for wildlife, feeding wildlife, and got a salt block for them. So that's one thing. And then I had stepped off the distance from the camera, and I've got the figures wrote down somewhere, but it was like over 100 feet. So if it was a coon, and I mean, you can see the eyes, but you can't see anything else, or what appears to be eye shine. I'm not going to say it's eye shine, but it appears to be eye shine.
Right.
But there's no indication of any kind of animal on the tree, and he would either have to be on the tree or standing behind the tree, and the tree's kind of laid over diagonally. So it would have to be standing on the ground or laying on the tree trunk. But if it's standing on the ground, the eye shine's at the 7 feet level, because I'm 6'1", and I had a tape measure at 7 feet where I could about guess where the eyes was.
Mm-hmm.
So it would have, if it was a coon, it would have to been a coon or even a cat of just tremendous size. I mean, for that spacing between eye shine. I'm not that good at estimating, but I know that if you know the diameter of the tree and the distance and stuff, you can get a rough estimate. And besides, there's a deer that's halfway between the camera and the tree, and his eye shine is not as wide as whatever's on the tree.
Right.
A dove. So, but then there's another one. I don't know how. I'm kind of iffy myself. There's another series that's got orbs, and I know the controversy about orbs, and I agree with it too. Mm-hmm. Dust, whatever, but they're strange. They're in patterns.
Yeah.
And they're not on any other series. You would think you would get orbs if you was going to get dust or whatever, what have you. You'd have them on different occurrences, but there's not. And then I have one where it's on a stump and there's something, and I couldn't tell you what it was. I mean, I can't even describe what it is. I'll send you the pictures I'm talking about and let you see, especially the one behind but whatever it is, it looks. I'll let you decide what it looks like, because I can't even describe what it looks like. And it's right behind the stump, and I mean, you can. It's there, and there's no. The picture before it was like I can't remember the time, but it was like that day, early that morning. This is like at night, and the following picture, the next picture was like the following morning. So there's no immediate before and after. Mm-hmm. Picture to trip in the picture, but I'll send you that, especially that one, let you get your opinion on it. But
yeah, I'd like to see it. Yeah, the reason I asked is because I've seen, a lot of people will show me trail cam pictures, and a lot of it's like, I don't know, a lot of it'll be something, that mm-hmm. And you can't say, but some of the more interesting ones I've seen have been kind of light phenomenon, have been orbs and things like that. And again, it's like you said, I can't. It's the hardest thing in the world to prove, especially because there are so many orb pictures that turn out to be dust or whatever. But some of these are really, really interesting. Some of the ones I've seen.
Right. There's another little quick one to give you an instance of varying of the phenomena, I guess you could say there. My sister and my mother and my stepfather was up there. This has been back last year too. This was in the evening. I mean, it was 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and my sister and stepdad both saw this, and this would be the same. They were standing in the driveway, same driveway that the orb was in, or the light was in that followed the pickup truck. But I was standing there, and this a black. My sister described it as a rip in space, is what she said. Came across from one side of the mountain, which would have been one cliff edge, all the way across the road and into the cliff edge, the rock face of the opposite side. And my sister and my stepdad both saw that, and they described it as just a black mass with. You said it could see different, it might be more transparent in some areas, but they would both describe the trailing end of it as like flapping, like a flapping motion. The front end was more stable, and the back end was like a fluttery, flapping motion. Right. But they both saw that, and I don't have no reason not to believe either one of them. They're family, but my stepfather, he's a church man, and he wouldn't have to lie to save him. And he's like, I don't know what it could have been. It was just a black form, a black moving form.
I don't know if I want to see something. I guess if it keeps its distance, I wouldn't mind.
Right. Well, the cliff that it went into, right on top of that, virtually right on top of that hill, is where I heard whatever come after me. The stumping and the children's voices. I mean, it's the same cliff. So. Yeah,
that's very, very interesting. That's not the least bit surprising, actually.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much happening there. It's just, I don't know. It's just, I'm gonna try to document it all eventually, but it's just there's so many little weird things happening there. But I've got one more. We've hit pretty much every base. I was wondering if you wanted a good UFO story.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Now this is a pretty good one, and this also happened to my father. He was a police at the time in this small town here. I'm not going to say where, but it's just it's a smaller co-town, and there was him and one other officer at the time. One's with patrol one part of town, the other patrol the other, and he gets a call from this other officer. He says, "Meet me at this certain restaurant, and I need to talk." Okay, nothing out of the ordinary. And my dad meets him there, and this other officer starts telling him, he's like, "I've seen lights in the sky up here at this in this hollow on his patrol area." And man's like, "Okay, what are you talking about?" He's like, "I've seen strange lights. Come with me, follow me." And old man was telling me, he's like, "Well, I didn't know what to think. I think maybe he needed to sleep a while or rest or something." And he told him, he said, go turn your radio off and get you a few winks, and I'll cover your town." He's like, no, come. You need to come with me. So he talks him into following him. He's following him up this, what at that time would have been just a little gravel road, led to some fields back out of town, just right out of town. And they're talking back and forth over the car radios, behind him. And he said, all at once, he said, there's a big bright spot that appeared in the sky right up ahead of him. And he said it just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And old man's hollering on the radio. He's like, "It's going to hit you." And he said it come right over top of their cars. And he was like, it just about took the lights off of his partner's car in front of him. Says it flies over, sits down in this field, says it just sits straight down. And old man and the other police, they get out, and they're walking up to it, and he always laughing. He said, I won't say his name. He said, he was shaking pretty bad. Said you could hear the round, the bullets in his revolver shaking, you know.
Wow.
And he said that he hears him pull it and cocks his pistol, and he's like, put that away, you know. I mean, it's nothing. You don't need that. It won't do any good anyway. So they're coming up on this UFO on the ground, or just sitting on the ground. He said there was no. This is the way he described it. He said it looked like a discus, like an Olympic discus, you know, like a pipe or 2 pipe hands or whatever, but like a discus.
Mm-hmm.
Said it was like 35, 40 feet across and probably half that in the middle. He said it looked like fluorescent light all over it, but there was like swirling colors all in it. It was like different colors. Couldn't see any kind of landing gear, any kind of porthole, anything. It was just perfectly smooth and lit up. And they're coming up on this, and he was just had to know, man. I mean, he was not scared of anything like that. I mean, it was a very tough individual, and he said he had every intention to seeing what was in it if he could. But he said they both got within 30 feet or so of it. Said it raised up real slow, about 35, 40 feet. Sat there, hung there silently for a second or two. Gone. So it was just in that. I mean, just as quick. He always likened it to the Next Generation when Enterprise goes into warp speed. He said that's what it's like. It's like it was just streaked and gone, you know. But he told me that his whole life, and this is the weird part, if you can say that. Well, all that wasn't weird. What time that they had been gone, the dispatch had been hollering at both of them. They had been continuously hollering. They heard the radios going off like, well, we've been trying to contact you, but they had been on their radios talking back and forth, but dispatch didn't hear them. So, you know, they was radio silent for 30, 40 minutes or whatever. But although that had been using their radios.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, they decided, you know, not to, which I don't blame either one of them for deciding not to report that, because, I mean, this would have been the late 60s. So,
yeah,
you know, I mean, man needs his job, you know.
Right.
But my man told that, I heard the story all my life. And I mean, he was not a man given over to exaggeration of any kind, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that must have been something. So there's not necessarily missing time. There's just time where they were on the radio that other people couldn't hear them. In other words,
right? Yeah, that's. I mean, there was radio silence for over 30 minutes. Although they was using the radio and they could talk back and forth to one another, but dispatch couldn't hear them, which
mm-hmm.
they should have heard them. You know,
right.
You got 2 officers in the field and talking back and forth, and dispatch is not receiving. I mean, that's not logical.
Yeah, it's not. Well, it wasn't for them.
I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's wild. Up close and personal. So did he say if it made any sound?
No, he said it was completely silent the whole time. So there was no sound whatsoever. It just and you know, he said it was sitting on the ground, but there was he didn't see any kind of like landing gear or anything. He just said it would look like a discus, and it was completely smooth and emitting light, like a fluorescent light. I'm assuming more or less white, you know,
mm-hmm.
but there was swirls of color and bands of color moving through it.
That's an awesome story.
Yeah, he told me. I mean, you know, it's something that he told me in my whole life, and I mean, I don't know. I've never personally. I would like to see something, but the closest I've came as far as UFOs is just, you know, I've seen weird lights in the skies and stuff like that, but I've never seen what I would say would be even claim could be an alien spacecraft, you know.
Yeah, well, and once again, as we were saying, I'm not sure that's what they are anyway. Yeah.
No. He was my man's pet theory. Even back then was they were either interdimensional or time. You know, He's
Mm-hmm.
from the future or something. That was his. He never did really subscribe to what he would go into it. Like I said, this stuff never interested my dad. He was just more straight up,
Isn't that funny though? People have these experiences, and some people are just like, yeah, it's whatever,
Yeah.
And they'll tell you about them, but then you could just tell it's not that, they don't have a lot of interest in it.
Yeah, he didn't, but no, he was a very brave man. As far as he was really afraid of anything, but he did not like supernatural, paranormal stuff. Is the only thing that really bothered him, as far as really not liking it.
Right.
I guess I heard it from him, that part. I was like, I really wish it was so as simple as what science tells us it is, but I don't know. I know better, and I understand it's all, my evidence is all anecdotal, but that's all that matters to me is my experiences and what I've gleaned from it. I can tell people, they can either believe me or not, but it don't really. At the end of the day, it don't really matter to me, other than my children knowing, like I said before, that if something weird happens to them, kind of don't let it lure you in, I guess.
Right.
It's the best.
Yeah. Well, Lance, thank you so much for sharing your stories.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you for indulging me and letting me get this stuff off my chest. It's been rough, trying to think about all these things, and you don't have anybody to talk to that could even come close to understanding what you're saying, or
right.
giving you the benefit of the doubt, even.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm lucky in that I get to talk about it all the time. But yeah, I understand. There's a lot of people are isolated with it.
I tell you, I'll send you those photos and description of what you're looking at and stuff. And I've got some more stories sometimes if you're interested. I want to try to, of course, between working a regular job, and I'm trying to get all these things put together and put them on a blog or something. But I really appreciate you talking with me, and
sure thing.
Best of luck with your endeavors. You're doing valuable work. There are people out there that does appreciate what you're doing. So
thank you so much. Did you want to share your blog? You're welcome to share it.
Well, it's Appalachian Paranormal Experiences, but now it's pretty simple. I think I've got a couple of my stories on there. Mm-hmm. I'm not an accomplished writer by no means. My job has got me in the habit of writing as unflowery as it's what I write on the job is to the point, and there's no story elements to it. So I'm not a very accomplished writer, and the blog is pretty simple. But I'm hoping to work on it as much as possible and share some of the experiences and stuff out there with everybody.
Well, you'd be surprised. Local folks might be more willing to reach out to you than to me. You might be surprised by that.
Well, I absolutely would love if anybody has any experiences, especially with the beckoning voice phenomenon and like the trickster type incidences. I would love to hear about, because I can't be the only one with the beckoning voices. I'm not, but I can't be the only one that's had jokes, more or less, to say. Mm-hmm. Played on in hills, and I would love to hear from anybody, anytime.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Have a good evening.
You too. Strange Familiars is brought to you by our patrons. Thank you so much, patrons. Without our patrons' help, we could not make Strange Familiars. If you would like to become a patron and help us make Strange Familiars and get bonus content besides, check out our Patreon. It's patreon.com/strangefamiliars. There's all different levels of support there. You can get things like t-shirts, books, music, and more. But at just $3 a month, you get full extra episodes of Strange Familiars. We do at least one exclusive patron episode every month. Often we do more, and we try to give other bonuses besides. You can check it out again at Patreon. It's patreon.com/strangefamiliars. If you do not like the idea of a monthly subscription, like Patreon, and you still want to help, there's a paypal.me link in the show notes of every episode at strangefamiliars.com, where you can make a donation via PayPal. Everyone can help by sharing the show on social media, liking and subscribing wherever you're listening, whether it's Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, wherever it is you're listening, and leave us those nice 5-star reviews. That helps get the podcast in front of new potential listeners. And of course, I want to thank everyone for listening, and I want to send out a very special thank you to Ann V. for her very kind PayPal donation. Thank you very much, Ann. That's a huge help. We will be back soon with another episode of Strange Familiars. Strange Familiars is a production of Dark Holler Arts, music, books, art, podcasts, and more. darkhollerarts.com. Intro and background music is by Stone Breath. Go to stonebreath.bandcamp.com for more. You can find us on Facebook, facebook.com/strangefamiliars, where you can also join the Strange Familiars Gathering group. And we are on Instagram at Strange Familiars.
Hey, Tim. My name is Jamie. I live in Alberta, Canada. And for quite a while, I lived in Prince George, British Columbia, and spend a lot of time in the bush. Not so much nowadays with the family, but try and get out as much as I can. But I'm a seasoned bush person. And my buddy, who also is very seasoned in the bush, him and I were out one day looking for some medicine in the forest. I'm First Nations. I go out and collect medicine off and on. Anyway, we parked on the highway because we thought that might be a good spot where we had stopped to walk off into the bush. Out in the highway, we were quite a ways away from town. So we go into this forest, kind of a swampy area, and we're looking around, and we don't find a whole lot, so we decide we'll head back to the car and maybe look elsewhere. Now, you got to keep in mind that the snow was on the ground, so we could see our tracks. Not a lot of snow, but enough to know where we came from. And in the process of walking around, we made more tracks. Well, still, we could follow our tracks out. And when we turned around to leave, we both of us just got confused. I lost one of my good axes that I used to go get medicines. It just kind of disappeared. I must have left it on the ground. Walked around to find that. I couldn't find it. Not a trace of it. And it got to the point where I had to pull out my phone, and luckily there was service, and go on Google Maps and locate myself to see where the highway was. And the highway, I could hear the cars going by, but still, it's like something was trying to turn me another direction. I didn't have no confidence that the highway was in that direction, even though I could hear the cars driving by. So I had to follow that app out. And then we came out by the highway, and everything was fine. But it was kind of a creepy feeling, because I don't usually get lost. I never get lost. I just spent 5 hours in the bush last weekend hunting. New area I haven't really ever gone in. I knew where I came in at. I knew where to get back out again. No problems. But that day, it was kind of scary. And I was listening to your podcast with the Pigeon Hills today, and it just kind of dawned on me. I wanted to call you and leave a voicemail about that. You can use this if you want on your show. I really like your show. You guys seem like really good people, you and Soraya. You guys really remind me of some friends I had back home, and one of my friends that had passed away, kind of nice to listen to your shows because You remind me of him, the way you guys act and talk. So it's kind of nice. Reminds me of him. It gives me a good feeling. So anyway, yeah, I have some other stories. Maybe I'll call back another time. Have a great day.
Stop our songs, we shall play, they can stop